Recording in progress. That's what's up. Okay, so I'd like to welcome our speakers today, Stephanie Long and Mike Long. They share the same last name because they are joined in holy matrimony. And I'm hoping there will be puns. I'm here for the puns, but y'all aren't here for me. So without any more of me, please let them take it away.
Thank you, Jordan. I like the joke that Jordan had that we spatially joined our lives together and merged our family branches. Yeah, so Mike and I met in grad school. We were at Texas State getting our master's in geography, and a friend of ours, a common friend, helped us form our friendship, which we still have today. Lucky for me. Um, we've got two QR codes here. The one on the left is for Mike, if you'd like to connect with Mike. And the one on the right is for me, if you'd like to connect with me. We're having a competition to see who gets the most new connections after today. We'll see who wins.
Oh, this is the first I heard of this competition.
All right, y'all. So there is a URL in the chat and on the screen. If you could visit that URL, this is an audience tool where you can ask questions as we go through the presentation. So don't unmute and ask your question, just type it right there in that Q&A section. We're going to be keeping an eye on that and answering questions as they come through as it pertains to the discussion. But we'll also have an open Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. So what happens when the honeymoon phase of tedious GIS workflows is over? How do you maintain a healthy relationship with your daily tasks? Automation is the key to a happy marriage. The goal of this workshop is for you to learn how to marry FME with GIS to automate your extract, transform, and load workflows. You're going to gain access at the second to last slide that we have for you today to a website, which is a free open access course that will teach you how to get started with FME and automating your GIS workflows. All right. So the GIS analysis workflow consists of question, inform, analyze, evaluate, and present. What question are you trying to answer? What data do you need to answer the question? How will you analyze that data? What geoprocessing tools will you use? Then when you get your results, you don't just accept that as truth, right? You have to evaluate those results. You might update your question, you might gather new data, you might modify the steps of your analysis. And then once you're satisfied with the results, you present your findings to your intended audience. This workflow that you do is often completed manually, but there's times when you might want to automate your workflow or automate some steps of your workflow. You have access to a wide range of options if you are a GIS professional and using GIS software and seeking to automate some of those common workflows. My experience with automating my GIS workflows includes utilizing Model Builder, Python, and FME, among others. So I'm going to speak to those today. Workflows where automation using FME is appropriate include, let's say your project data is stored in several formats and locations, or you're trying to acquire data from different locations. Not only can FME automation help save time, it can help ensure your data quality through the attribute filters and feature filters and making comparisons. And what's nice is that FME can even download your project data directly from the source website, extract the zip file for you into your project folder, and you can visualize those features directly in the application. And all of this integration and automation leads to a faster completion of that data collection and data assimilation portion of the GIS analysis workflow. Through the use of extensions, so advanced capabilities can be added to your GIS software by third-party extensions, such as the ArcGIS data interoperability. This brings functionality on top of what's already in ArcGIS Pro, and FME is a good example of that. So this includes tools for spatial ETL, data validation, data export, workflow automation, and more. Advantages include automation of workflows, documenting your processes, sharing custom tools, saving time and getting the answer to the question, and integrating with a number of systems like Oracle spatial databases, Google KML files, Amazon Web Services, and more. FME has support for over 450 formats, including shapefiles, geodatabases, CAD drawings, point clouds, and even more recently, generative AI. With advanced data transformation capabilities, it allows easy access and manipulation of data from nearly any source for use within your ArcGIS software. Whether you're trying to import data from, let's say, non-native GIS applications like MapInfo or Small World, to Excel spreadsheets, to CAD drawings, to raster images, LiDAR data, point clouds, JSON files, XML databases, you name it, FME makes the conversion process simple.
I wanted to add in a little bit on this, Stephanie. Often when we're doing automation, we think that we need to finish the whole process. And that may not be what you have to do. You could use FME to do half of your process. So if your day-to-day task takes an hour, if you're able to use FME to take up half of that, and it is able to process your data in 5-10 seconds, well, you've now saved yourself a lot of time, and it's only taken a half an hour of your effort. And so it's good to think about this development of your automations as kind of an iterative process of getting it to take over half of your work or 45 minutes of your work. To be honest, I have some where I've never fully finished the automation. I could expand it out, but I don't do these processes on a regular enough basis that I feel that I need to actually spend a bunch of time finishing the automation from the beginning to end. It does a chunk of it. I then have to load a Python script, maybe change a couple variables, run that script, load another workbench, a couple more variables, and run that script again. But it takes a lot of the processing time of manual effort away. So as you're doing these things and as you're building these automations, think about how you're going to free up a little bit of your time, and then over months, maybe years, you're able to finish it and get it to free up a lot more of your time.
Yeah, that's great. You can use it where you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to use it without feeling overwhelmed. That's great. All right, so FME is an application that allows you to import, convert, and write data from different sources and kind of reformat that and then send it out to your new format or new system or new location. So extract, transform, and load is the ETL. It refers to 3 separate functions and combines those into a single workflow. The E, extract, reads the data from the source that you specify. The T, transform, converts the data using the different parameters that you've set. And the L, load function, writes the results of your workflow out to that new location. So the ArcGIS data interoperability extension for desktop is an integrated spatial extract, transform, and load toolset. It runs within the geoprocessing framework using Safe Software's FME technology. FME stands for Feature Manipulation Engine. When using the extension here, you can launch the workbench directly from ArcGIS Pro on the analysis ribbon. It allows you to author your own FMW files, and those files can be directly attached to a spatial ETL tool, which we're going to show you later on. So upon clicking the workbench option under the data interrupt button there on the analysis ribbon, FME opens in a new window. This is a standalone application with its own helpful interface features. At the top, you have your traditional menus and toolbars with access to different settings and tools. You also have the canvas, and this is, if you will, the main stage where you're going to author your ETL workflow. And then the panel on the left, Navigator, allows you to see what your workbench workflow includes. It's kind of like a summary of the workflow in the different settings. Below that is the Transformer Gallery, and this is where you can find over 600 different ways of transforming your data. Now, I know that might sound a little daunting, but ArcGIS Pro has over 600 geoprocessing tools. I don't know about you, but in my over 20 years of GIS industry experience, I've never used all 600 of those geoprocessing tools. I find the ones I need for the workflow at hand, and the same is true for FME. Just as in Model Builder, FME workbenches allow you to author and edit the parameters of your different tools to make sure that it's doing the workflow that you really want it to do, hopefully. And if you've ever used the Python window in Pro, you might find the translation log here familiar. This is going to be Kind of like if you run a model in Model Builder, or if you run a Python snippet in the Python window, it gives you some messaging to let you know what's going on, keeps you updated. Then there is my favorite, which is the visual preview. This allows you to inspect features that are stored in the automation cache. You can view the source data location on file and even drop in files for preview. So let's take a look at an example of that. In this example, the Workbench workflow goes to a website where the image tiles are stored. It compares the geographic footprint of the study area, shown in pink, to the footprint polygon of the tiles, shown in orange, and only downloads the image tiles that overlay with the study area polygon, which is kind of the light purple that you see here. This study area is in the intersection of Mopac Loop 1 and far southwest Austin that went from a single point interchange to a double crossover diamond, I think is the right terminology. I am not a construction person.
I've heard of it called diverging diamond.
Diverging diamond. Okay, thank you. So yeah, the intersection changed from this kind of flat, simple intersection to an elevated, quite fancy intersection. And we wanted to visualize the changes over time. So the Workbench literally goes out and just grabs the imagery tiles that are needed for that specific study area. So you can see the attributes of the results here from the string concatenator. This takes the data hub URL where the imagery is stored. It concatenates it out to create a substring of the tile number. And then that tile number is used by the HTTP caller to get the specific tile because it overlaps that study area polygon. Then we have the graphic preview, not geographic, the graphic preview that shows the features of the study area shapefile, the tile index shapefile, and the tiles that are selected by the spatial filter transformer. So here in the workflow, the author can see the results right away and make sure that that workflow really is doing what you want it to be doing.
Before you go on, Steph, we do have a couple questions. First, somebody's asking, what does FME stand for? I answered it in the chat, but I'd like to go ahead and just speak to it for a second. It stands for Feature Manipulation Engine, where feature is your row of data that may contain spatial. So it allows you to actually work with that spatial information. And then Doug, who I used to work with, asked about the difference between ArcGIS Pro interop extension and FME desktop.
We have a slide on that later.
We have a slide on that later. Okay, so we'll cover it then.
Yes. Great questions. Keep them coming. Please go into that slides.app.goo.gl URL there. It's also in the chat. Keep those questions coming. The flow of the Workbench canvas is similar to that of the Model Builder model, starting on the left and flowing to the right by default. This example, Workbench loads a spreadsheet. This is called a reader. And then with the transformer, it takes the coordinates that are in the spreadsheet, those number values, and creates a vertex at each of those locations. And then the last process on the right here is a writer. And this is where you designate the output workspace, in this example, a shapefile. So let's take a look at creating this workflow in the canvas from scratch. In the canvas, you can just start typing the name of the transformer, and you can pick it from the list. It will place the transformer in the canvas. You can then drag and drop an Excel file directly into the canvas. Notice the translation log letting you know what it's working on. Then you can choose the tabs in the sheet that you want to bring into the canvas. Uncheck the ones that you don't want. That drops the reader that you can move over near the transformer and connect the two. When you do that, the transformer needs some parameters. So you can choose the dropdown and choose the fields in the sheet that make up the coordinates for each vertex that you want to create. You can also click the writer button up in the toolbar. This will allow you to set the parameters for the writer, in this case, choosing a shapefile as our output location and then saying where that folder location is on your computer. And then again, the translation log there telling us what's going on. So now we have a writer that we can connect. And now the workflow from start to finish has the reader, the transformer, and the writer, connecting those output ports to the input ports. And it's that easy. So some of that workflow probably looked familiar if you have worked with Model Builder before. So next I wanted to take a look at some I can't say that word, similarities between Model Builder and Workbench. So on the left-hand side here, I've got a screen grab of Model Builder. You can see the workspace area. In FME on the right-hand side, the Workbench there has the canvas. You'll notice in both, they have connection arrows indicating the direction of the workflow. You also have the ability to edit the parameters, search for tools, and kind of zoom and pan in around in that workspace. And then there's the ever important undo button, which is my best friend. I don't know how many of you have been in the GIS industry for a while, but there used to not be an undo button in Model Builder. Life was really hard back then. I love my undo button.
I agree, Stephanie.
I needed it too much, probably way too often. But anyways, here we see that in both Model Builder and FME, you can create some similar ways of grouping your tools together. So in Model Builder, you can group tools in Workbench on the right-hand side in the green and the orange. It's called a bookmark. And then in Model Builder, you can add labels. So here I have my first LAS file and my second LAS file. In the Workbench, it says read in the CSV schema. So we've got ways of kind of annotating the Workbench to remind ourselves of what we're working on. But I want to point out.
I want to add in a kudos for the annotation. Trust me, if you haven't done this much, when you open up a Workbench 6 months or a year later, if you don't have good annotation, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what you made.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like a note to your future self.
Yeah.
And it's got advanced techniques. Like you could put a hyperlink in, like hyperlink to your standard operating procedure document as even additional resources when you're coming back to this workflow to do again.
Good point.
All right, so I want to point out one major difference that I think is key, and the FME Workbench really takes the trophy prize here. If you notice along the directional arrows of the workflow, it has numbers. It's telling you how many features are making it through your workflow, which is awesome. So they have to kind of pass the test in order to move on to the next step in the workflow. In this example, we start with a CSV file that has 1,315 rows. Those are then tested in 2 separate workflows, one for school-related permits and one for demolition-related permits here in the Austin area. There are 9 schools and 17 demolitions that come through. Once we remove duplicates, we can create the vertices from the coordinates and then write those results out. Schools ended up having 4 points on the map and demolitions had 6. So we're shown the results in the form of feature counts directly in the workflow at each step in the workflow. You don't have to right-click on your output, add to display, go to your map, open the attribute table, count the number of rows. It's all there for you right in your workflow, which is really cool.
Back onto that annotation thing real fast, Stephanie. Somebody, it was Linda in the chat, asked how many people rename their transformers. And this is actually a great thing to point out, that you can rename the transformer. So you can see in Stephanie's example, you have duplicate filter 2. Comes in originally as duplicate filter, and then when you put in another one, it puts in the _2. Me personally, I don't do that, and that's only because I like to see the name of the transformer, and that way I know what it's doing. But I know a lot of people that do like to rename the transformers, and that's kind of their way of doing the annotation. So it's just simply a personal preference kind of thing. So you have options in how you annotate and kind of make notes within your workbench.
Yeah, and you can do that in Model Builder as well. So I've got, the blue bubble there is going out and getting data. I can't read, I'm getting old. USGS. So I could rename that instead of having that USGS long string. I could say input LAS file. Great.
And you can see she's got some bookmarks there. You can even put a lot of information into the titles of your bookmarks. You can even attach annotation to the bookmarks themselves, which is helpful, especially when you collapse the bookmarks, which is something you can do. You can condense them so that they take up a lot less space. So they give you lots of options to keep the documentation good while you're going.
And I'm watching the questions, and we are going to get to several of them in future slides. So please don't feel like I'm ignoring your questions. We will get to them for sure. All right, so let's go back to that workbench that we just created, and let's run it so you can see this in action. So we are talking about labels, and those being annotation. Here I am creating an annotation for my reader. you can see the other annotations that already exist. So describing each step of the workflow. And then when you're ready to run your workbench, you've got some options. Here, I'm clicking on the writer, and then I'm going to say run to this. It highlights in green the workflow that it's going to run, allows me to modify my parameters if I want to, and then I can run it. So check out the numbers on the directional arrows. We have 114 features. Once the workbench finishes running, the cache is available for inspection, and you can look at attributes and features. So in the top, if I choose a row in the attributes, it selects that feature in the graphics preview. I can then zoom to selected and see exactly where that feature is. All right, so I mentioned Python earlier. ArcGIS is a spatial analysis software that does some great ETL. And FME is an ETL software that works really well with all kinds of GIS data formats. But by integrating Python, you can have more advanced FME workflows. This example here is a Python script that's integrated into a larger workbench. It allows the user to dissolve line features properly. With FME, in this case, the aggregator shown in gray wasn't doing the job. So it was disconnected from the workflow, and it was replaced by what you see below in blue. The aggregator created features that then threw an error when those features were uploaded to ArcGIS Online. So by bringing Python into the mix, the correct features can be made, and using a series of GIS tools get around that issue. All right, I mentioned that FME works with over 450 data formats, and JSON is one of them. Here, the creator kicks off the workflow to allow the HTTP caller to go out to a website and grab a JSON file. Then the JSON fragmenter filters through the information in JSON. And I've got an example of that JSON here in the top right. It takes that JSON and it places the information from the JSON into a table with the proper column headings. So you can see here we have our column headings and the attributes being plugged into that table. So let's take a look at this completed workbench in action. So I've got several transformers. They're all bookmarked into a group called source data. The creator, the HTTP caller, the JSON fragmenter. Next up is the vertex creator. We then take that and pass it through a coordinate system setter. And we can visually inspect the results. And what I noticed was that I have a bunch of columns that I don't necessarily want. So for example, response body, I don't really need that in my output table. So by clicking that connection, making sure it's selected, I literally just start typing attribute and find the attribute manager, and it plugs the attribute manager into the workflow already connected and ready to go. So that's another nice feature, no disconnecting and connecting, plugging things in, it does it for you. So attribute manager allows you to come in and grab the columns of information that you don't want to come across. Click the minus sign to get rid of them. Click OK.
You can also hit delete
Okay.
to make life easier.
On your keyboard.
It's a little uncomfortable hitting delete, but you'll get used to it.
Yeah, I would be like, no, you're going to delete my whole workbench. No. But you can see here right away, I see those columns of information in my output in that writer. So I know I'm just going to get the columns of information that I care about. I can view the source, take a look at those attributes, make sure the columns are correct, look at the features in the graphics preview, and then also look at the unexposed attributes that I'm leaving out. And then you have a little folder icon. You can open the containing folder of your data set, and it will show you in Windows File Explorer where that output was put. No copying, pasting into your Windows File Explorer, just go straight to it. All right, so we have a workbench. We put some work into creating a workflow that we want to automate. If you want to bring this over into Pro in a different way, you can create a spatial ETL tool that calls on that workspace. So these are user-created geoprocessing tools that will help you transform your data between different data models or different data file formats. You can take that FME workbench that you created and plug it in here to a tool by browsing out and locating that FMW file. So you can run your workbench manually, as I've shown. Manual triggers allow you to test a workflow before allowing it to run automatically based on a real trigger. That way you can make sure everything's working well. You can also schedule actions to kick off jobs, or you can use triggers to make or take that action. Triggers are designed to listen for external events, such as a modification to your directory. Maybe a file was dropped in a folder, or an email, and that kicks off an action. FME flow can be configured to receive emails. Once received, they can serve as an automated trigger that kicks off a workflow. FME can monitor directories for updates, including adding, changing, and deleting of files. Another trigger option utilizes webhooks to take action with HTTP post, put, or delete request messages using JSON.
On this, we've got a couple questions in the chat where people are asking a little bit more about whether or not they should be using Task Scheduler or FME Server. And you can totally use Task Scheduler. Where I think you would want to start using FME Server is when you start having a lot of jobs that you need to run on a very regular basis. At my place of work, we have some that run every 10, 15 seconds. We have a number of them that run each night. And so doing that with Task Scheduler would be a little challenging, but if you have one or two, you could totally get away with it. The other challenge that you have to think about with Task Scheduler is typically when people are doing that, they're doing it on their local workstation and not on a server instance. So if you're having a lot and these are starting to become mission critical, then you also want to consider moving it over to FME Server, even looking at putting FME Server into a high availability configuration so that you have multiple engines spread across multiple servers. Your IT department would appreciate that. In another example of this is, you mentioned the task scheduler, but Stephanie was mentioning some of these other triggers that you can use. Receiving an email, we have some where when that email comes in, FME Server checks that email box on a very regular basis. And depending on the information that it gets, what's in the subject line, who it came from, who the email comes from, whether or not there's an attachment, that's how it decides which workbench to send it to. And then it processes that data properly. Directory Watcher is another good one where you can tell FME Server to monitor a folder on your network share. And when a file gets either created or modified, it will kick off and kick off a job, and that job will actually process the data. Stephanie mentioned webhooks a little bit. That's where if you have another system, I want to use it with ArcGIS Enterprise very soon here, where say a new user comes into your portal or ArcGIS Online, or a new feature is created in a service, you can configure it to send a webhook, and then FME Server will receive that webhook, depending on the messaging that's in there, and that little JSON message that Stephanie mentioned, will make it decide what to do, how you can kind of send it between the different jobs that you want it to work on. So those are some of the benefits that you get of moving into using FME Server as opposed to just doing Task Scheduler. Of course, if you don't need all that, use Task Scheduler. It's the same thing we were talking about in a previous slide. We're just trying to automate our work. And if Task Scheduler allows you to get some work automated, go that route.
That's great.
I'm done, Stephanie. I'm off my soapbox now.
No, thank you. You've got experience that I don't have. So you're my SME here. So thank you for chiming in and answering that. That's great. All right, so we have a question. What are the benefits of using ArcGIS Pro interoperability extension versus FME Desktop? I've used FME Desktop for years, but never the extension. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's answer it. All right, so it's important to note that there is a difference between the integrated FME workbench accessed in ArcGIS Pro with the ArcGIS data interoperability extension and using FME Desktop. One obvious difference is that ArcGIS Pro only runs on Windows machines, not Macs or Linux. It's also isn't going to be the most up-to-date version of Workbench. But whatever version you're using, you'll have access to support and free training. And Mike has more experience with these two, so I'll let him speak to that more.
I'll be honest, I haven't actually used data interop other than what you've showed me. I'm pretty confident, if I remember correctly, that the data interop is kind of a slimmed down version of FME desktop. So if you're purchasing it directly from SAFE, you do get more options. Up until recently, SAFE used to have different kind of license levels, but they recently did a rebranding about a year ago, and now they're only selling the top end of the license level. So you get a lot more. You get the ability to use it outside of ArcGIS Pro if that's something that you want. I think that's really about it. You get you get updates faster. So one of the challenges, Stephanie kind of mentioned this, is that if you're going through Esri, you have to wait for them to release their product, and so then they're wrapping in what they have with the data interop. So there's just a little bit of a lag time. The one advantage to going with Esri, though, a lot of people already have site licenses with Esri, or they're licensing going through Esri, and it might be easier to go that method than to set up a new license account with a new vendor. It kind of depends on your place of work and how easy that is. So as you can see, there's options, and you really have no excuses. You should just buy it. Oh, and by the way, I dropped a link in the chat. It takes you to a community on the FME site. Bruce Harold is responding here. He works at Esri on the data interop team, so he's got a lot of knowledge. There's a link within that forum that also takes you to a page. It's a little bit like what Stephanie has here, maybe a little bit more in depth. So you can kind of review there and get a lot more information.
All right, we have another question. Which is more reliable, Model Builder or FME?
I'll let you answer that one when it comes to the Model Builder side. I know from my experience, since I use Model Builder a lot more with ArcGIS 8, ArcGIS Desktop 8, or whatever, not 8, 10, whenever they stopped their versioning, it crashed a lot. But I haven't used Model Builder a lot with Pro, so I'll let Stephanie talk about that one.
Yeah, I found it to be pretty stable with Pro, but honestly, I enjoy FME for my ETL workflows. It's just, I like the interactivity of those numbers moving across the screen as the workflow is running. I know that of 1,300, so many made it to this step, and so many made it to the next step, and so many have been written out. So that's a feature that I really enjoy about
I
the workbench.
I will point out that I spend a lot of time in FME. It really doesn't crash very often. Every once in a while, it kind of go into not responding. But with my experience of going from, ArcMaps Model Builder, I think a lot of people probably remember you would just not touch your computer in case it would crash while it was actually processing. I don't have that fear with FME, but it sounds like Pro is a lot better when it comes to not crashing. We'll take Stephanie's word on that one.
Don't quote me.
Don't.
Let's see here. I think there was another one in here that I wanted to get to right quick. If I can find it again. These are great questions. Please keep entering them in. There it is. How can you select or find the tool you need for a specific process? Out of 600 tools, is it the same as the ArcPro search bar?
Kind of. They do have a search kind of gallery over on the left of Stephanie's screen here. You can search over there. It even has, she doesn't have an expanded, yeah, down there. It's kind of got categorized things. If you make your own custom transformers, you can make them show up in the category. Oh, I thought that was just your presentation. I didn't know you could actually click it. So good, great. Thank you, Stephanie.
I have Workbench open and I'm happy to step through things.
Good job. But I think as you get more experience with it, you just start typing onto the canvas and it just pops up what you want. Over time, you'll know the name of the transformers. And that's actually probably another kind of tangent that we should discuss. Those of you that are experienced in ArcGIS and moving your way into FME, that seems to be the challenging part. I know that with my coworkers at my last company, a lot of them are actually in this chat. That was our challenge of knowing, buffer. You can Google this. You can say FME version of buffer tool or FME version of dissolve tool, and somebody has asked that before and Google seems to find it. So that's how we got started figuring out which transformers we wanted to be able to do what in what tool. Now, with that being said, and this kind of have been asked in the questions a little bit, not every tool is the same. Buffer is pretty much the same. I've mentioned the dissolver. It's not the same in FME. They call it the aggregator. It doesn't handle the geometries in the same manner. And so you can use the Python caller to actually open up ArcPy and you call in those Arc geoprocessing tools and use that. So if the results are a little bit different or for some reason you like its results better, you can always do it in that fashion. You just have to make sure you have ArcGIS installed on the machine that you're running it. So it'll pull that data in.
All right, great. Keep the questions coming, please. We do have another question that I was going to bring up, and I'm going to let Mike answer this one.
Oh.
Can you publish workbenches as geoprocessing services to ArcGIS Enterprise?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that one because I don't really have, I don't have it in the same way that I think you're discussing where it's using a geoprocessing service. The direction that I would probably go is using FME server to then run your ArcPy. Keep in mind that if you do that, though, you have to have ArcGIS Enterprise installed on the same machine as FME server so that it can get to the Arc objects and actually run that. You need to have that as well if FME server is reading and writing data into an enterprise geodatabase. So, some of us already have that configured. So it'd be kind of what I was just talking about. You're using ArcPy to do it. I do know that Esri sells data interop server. I don't have a whole lot of experience with it. Like I said, I don't use data interop. So I'm not answering your question specifically, but maybe giving you some workarounds. Sorry, Shelby. If anybody else knows, just put it in the chat for Shelby.
All right, we have another question. What is the typical learning curve for FME? Is the main advantage of its use speed or automation? Also, for a new user, what are some examples of introductory use? As a new user, the next slide that we're going to go to is going to give you access to an open course where you will be provided with slides, with data sets, with exercises, even a quiz to test your knowledge, and then eventually a project that you're going to run through. So that can be your kind of introductory use if you want to dive into that website that we're sharing with you today. I would say that SAFE software has outstanding training. I did a refresher course last week that some of these workbenches came from. They host this live training. It's 2 days, 4 hours each day, where you can go in and step through creating a workbench from scratch. And I found it really informative. The presenters are really helpful in stepping through all the questions that you have, and it's real world workflows that they teach you how to conduct in FME Workbench. So I definitely suggest the SAFE software training. Obviously, I work for Austin Community College, and we offer GIS courses on automation, and that's where the website's about. So definitely taking classes at your local community college is an option. And then Esri has free training as well for using the data interop extension. Mike, did you want to expand any further on the learning curve and whether its advantage is speed or automation?
I don't know if it's faster. I mean, Esri's done a lot of work in recent years to increase their geoprocessing, but also so has FME. I think for me, I find it, since I don't really use Model Builder anymore, I find that I go to FME to load my data. Just the WYSIWYG interface is a lot easier than developing it in, say, Python or something like that. You can just drag and drop and then configure. I think when it comes to learning, just to kind of elaborate on what Stephanie was saying, if you have some data that you are loading into your GIS, even if it's once or twice or on a regular basis, I would say start working with that. And that's what I started with. We had data that we needed to get into our GIS. We were looking for ways to make our life easier, and we just started working with it with FME. I think it's important to point out that data processing and loading into your GIS is not always the same thing as geoprocessing, where you're, what is the definition? You're making data from data. So, buffering is new data. FME does do some buffering, but its main power is taking your data from one source, transforming it to be what you need it to be, and then loading it into the place where you need it to go. I'm hoping we're answering your question well enough, Anonymous.
Anonymous.
Yeah, that's their real name, right?
Yes, absolutely. All right. How has learning FME changed your career, if at all?
Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. For me, it's changed my career in a way that allows me to automate my workflows using an intuitive interface that really gives me some insights into the workflow as the workflow is going, which has been really nice. Like Mike was talking about earlier, you can automate some workflows. Maybe you don't get the whole workflow or the whole process, but any automation that you can integrate into your daily tasks is going to save you time in your day. And all of that time adds up to you being able to do new things and take on new tasks and innovate in different ways in your daily tasks and your overall project workflows. So that part I really enjoyed. As a professor of GIS at Austin Community College, I have enjoyed teaching others FME and how to build their own workbenches to help them at their jobs. And that's been a really fun perspective for me to see the creativity that students have in their knowledge, skills, and abilities as they start to learn a new software.
For me, it has allowed me to keep our data up to date on a very regular basis. So where I work, we use ArcGIS Enterprise or Portal for ArcGIS as our main front end for our GIS. And FME is going around the agency and different entities and downloading data and pulling it out of databases and spatializing it, transforming it, and loading it into our GIS. It will even take data out of the GIS, transform it to what we need, and then send it to whatever vendor we're working with. And it's allowed me to do that in a manner that I never would have been able to do it before because I'm able to automate it. Just for an example, we have FME server running across 4 servers with 8 engines because it processes 35,000 jobs a day. I never would have been able to do that without FME. Some of these are really simple. It just takes a JSON file from one server and then publishes it to another server, but it does it every 10 seconds. And I don't know about you, but I can't even click process every 10 seconds. And then that's what I would be doing constantly. So it's allowed us to make our GIS pertinent and up to date for the users because it's just moving data around constantly. It's moving real-time data, it's processing data, and it's loading it into the GIS portal for the end users to actually use and make their decisions. So that's how it's changed my career. It's allowed us to do things that we simply would not have been able to do before.
Yeah, that's a great point. Who wants to click and click when someone else can do it for you?
Yeah. I used to have a coworker that said, why right click when you could write code? And I said, why write code when you could right click? And he's just, oh, okay, good point. So it goes both ways. But that's why they call FME a low code tool. You don't have to code in it whatsoever. You could totally get away with never doing any sort of coding in it. But you could also write some SQL queries so that when it queries against the database, it does a better job and maybe it's pulling out a lot less data and not having to pull it into FME before it processes it. You can, if it's dealing with a spatial database like SQL Server or Oracle, you can even have it process some of that spatial data in the database before it actually ever pulls it out into FME. Another example is you could write Python, and we talked about that a little bit. So, if FME can't do what you want it to do, typically you could figure out that Python can do it. So it does have some coding capabilities if you want.
How can existing custom Python scripts be used in FME? I've tried to incorporate this in the past with no success.
I responded to this person in the chat a little bit. The Python caller is the transformer that runs it. Python comes natively installed with FME. You can extend that by importing modules, although I will admit that it's kind of a pain in the rear to do. They keep changing it a little bit to make it work a little bit better. So I can't give you examples. You'll need to go look it up. And then you can also switch its scripting engine to work with Esri's Python. A lot of people don't know about this, Stephanie. If you go to the far left, where it says scripting under the navigator window, there you go. And then Python compatibility. Right now, yours is set to Esri. Perfect. Go ahead and double click on that. By default, it's going to be set to FMEs, and this is where you can go in. If you have ArcGIS installed, Pro or Desktop, it's going to give you the two options down at the bottom, or the options down at the bottom, depending on what versions you have. And so this is how you can switch it. If you want to run ArcPy, you've got to switch it here so that it will actually run pull in the Arc objects and process with it. Kristen Coates is pointing out the inline querier plus Python caller. That's a great example, Kristen. Kristen's a former coworker. I forget to use the inline querier a lot. It's really powerful. It's basically creating a kind of a database within the process of FME. And so it allows you to do subqueries and other queries within the actual workflow. Super powerful.
Nice. Y'all are getting fancy on me. All right, great. So moving on to the next slide. At Austin Community College in the GIS department, we teach a course on automating GIS workflows that includes FME. Through attending today's ERISA speaker series, you are gaining access to the course materials that we offer students. This open access website contains 3 topics of materials: slides, readings, exercises, all the data you need, and even a quiz. This is a free Google site. It's curated just for you. If you have any feedback on the website, I'm the author and I'm open to suggestions, so just let me know. After completing those 3 topics, try your hand at the project. This Google document steps you through analyzing the equity of Capital Metro's new Project Connect here in Austin by calculating Z-scores using census demographic data. You will create a very advanced workbench. It's going to have all kinds of fancy math, and you'll generate a map of your results. An example of that map result can be seen to the left of this video here, where we're looking at population attending high school. So if you attempt this project, please share it with me. I'm interested to hear how things went for you, what demographics you decided to focus on, and I always love seeing other people's workbenches. You can use the QR code to access the website, but I'm also going to place these 3 hyperlinks in the chat as well, while Mike talks about the next 2 items listed here.
So we talked about getting started by either using the data interop extension or using FME. If you have ArcGIS for home use, the data interop extension is available to you, and you can go ahead and license it. You do have to install it separately. If you don't have ArcGIS for home use, it's $100, and you get ArcGIS Online, you get a version of Pro, I think it's the advanced version, you get a bunch of extensions, and like we're talking about, the data interop extension. So it's a great way to learn and get started for a very cheap price. Now, FME or SAFE offers FME for free for home use. This used to be really easy. You just went to a form, you filled out your email address, your name, and you usually received a license within an hour or 2. But they've changed things. I asked them about this. They said that a lot of people were kind of using it for non-home use. So they've made it just a little bit more challenging. You want to fill out the form and communicate with them, but they want to communicate with you and make sure you fully understand that you're not using it for work and that you're using it for learning and things like that. So it's still available, but it's not as quick and easy. I did recently renew my home use license. I communicated with them and they didn't have any issues, especially since I already have FME licenses at work. So they offer that really fast. But The link to the site is here. You can go there, fill it out, communicate with them, and get that license and start learning. Stephanie, you're on mute if you're talking.
I muted myself because I was writing the word synchronous, and I don't always remember how to spell it. So I was cursing myself, and no one needs to hear that.
And just so you're aware, I have to drop off at 1 to go to another meeting.
Yep, no
I don't know
worries.
if you're continuing on without me. Do we want to take more questions?
Yes. How did you
Yeah.
get started with automating your GIS workflows in your career? So I got started, I worked for a small oil and gas lease company, and they had several lease analysts who would read through the lease, put all of the information about it into their lease management software, which the back end of was a database. And it was my job as the sole GIS person on staff to take that information every day and map the lease out actually on the map. As you can imagine, that is way too much work for one person to do on a daily basis. And so I taught myself Python, and I automated the process of taking the data from that database, porting it over to my GIS database, and then I created a custom geocoding service that geocoded to the public land survey system, township range section, quarters, all that, and then actually mapped out the lease and put it into the web map so that every morning when my manager came in, they could pull up the web map and see the leases that got processed the day before. And so that's how I got started with automating. I was the only person I needed to be able to do multiple people's worth of work in one day. So I had Python scripts that would run overnight while I was at home, asleep in my bed.
That's
And
the
in the
best
morning,
time.
in the morning, I would wake up and I would have an email and it would say, "Great job." Not really, but basically it would tell me the status of the scripts that ran overnight, whether they succeeded or not. So I knew before I even got to work if I had extra work to do or if everything was successful, and I could hit the ground running that morning. And that's how I started. What about you, Mike?
I got started with it at the last company I worked at. They're now called NLink Midstream, and there's actually a number of people on here that learned FME with me. Matt Windsor, Kristen Coates, and Doug Urich are all on here. So hopefully I'm doing them right and teaching a few things that we learned over the years. We went from having like 3,000 miles of pipe to having 8,000 or something like that overnight, and we did not double our workforce overnight. So we were very quickly looking at how could we get faster at doing our job. And there was one guy, Revis, that used FME a lot, and he kept telling us for years, "You guys need to learn this software." And we just kept saying, "Sure, we will." And he was right. He was 100% right. I should have learned it years before. But once we doubled those miles of pipe, we went ahead and started learning it. It was definitely beneficial. When I went to Cat Metro, it's like what Stephanie was saying. She was the only person. Well, I was the only person for many years, and I had to automate everything. And I got really good at automating everything with FME and Python. My mantra was, if I can't automate it, I'm not doing it, because I'm not going to be able to handle anything manual as one person for an entire public transit agency. So I have hundreds of workbenches, dozens of Python scripts. Everything that I do is pretty much automated. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without FME. And then, its sister Python, and combining the two together. So that's how I got started. And hopefully I'm giving you enough reason to get started yourself, because it's definitely worth it. I'll start with this one if you want, because I have to drop off in just a couple of minutes. I've done a little bit of CAD in FME. I'm going to admit that I'm not good at it, and that's because I'm not good with CAD. It's challenging, but FME is not the problem in this. FME does fine. It deals with CAD and Revit, I think is the name of it, and DGN and all those different formats. That's why they call themselves a spatial tool and not a geospatial tool, because it will deal with these formats that may not necessarily be a geospatial product. SAFE has lots of guides online to get started and walks you through dealing with CAD. So if you're having trouble with it, go there and work with it.
I'm going to interrupt you really quick because you have to hop off and I cannot answer this question.
Okay.
Any recommendations for those of us working towards their FME form certification?
Go through the training. I'll be honest, the test wasn't that hard, but I did it. It did take me 3 times. You just have to really pay attention to the question that they're asking. When I did it, I felt like they were trying to trip you up a little bit and really make you think about it. So go through the training, pay attention to how they're wording things. That's very important. Because if you're not taking your time and really reading it, then you're gonna choose the wrong option. That's really all I found. But if you're taking the lessons and using it, you know the material, you just need to get the wording just right.
Thank you. I found that with the Esri certifications as well.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the CAD one. In that website that I shared, there is a lesson on bringing CAD data into GIS. So get into that website, do that exercise. Hopefully you'll find it helpful. Thank you all so much for joining us today and listening in. Here's those QR codes again if you'd like to connect with us. Many, many thanks.
Just to throw it out there, Stephanie, I've already got like 6 connections since we've been on this.
No, you can't win.
Yes, I can. No. I put my LinkedIn profile in the chat.
Come on, y'all, scan the QR code on the right. The QR code on the right.
So just to let everyone know, right, it is the top of the hour. We want to respect everyone's canonical lunch break. However, Professor Stephanie Long has graciously agreed to stay a little bit for overtime. So if you have additional questions that you would like to ask and you don't mind staying around, she will be available here for a few minutes. And then for everyone else, we do record this. This is being recorded right now, and we will have it up on the Eurissa, Texas YouTube channel. Most all of our previous speaker series are also on the YouTube channel. So if you've got to drop off, that's fine. It will be recorded and you will be able to check out what you missed a little bit later. I get to turn it back over to Stephanie.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. All right. Does anyone have any other questions that I haven't answered? Let's see. Does ACC offer a class for Alteryx mirroring ArcGIS? Not currently, but I'm going to explore that. It's interesting. Let's see. Any other questions I can answer? So Mike would be a good person to answer the question, do you have a preference between on-premise or cloud-based server flow? He's got a lot of experience with that. So Marcus, if you want to reach out to him, I'm sure he'll talk your ear off, no problem. Let's see. There was another question on server type tasks by Matthew Reed. Again, reach out to Mike, he can help you with that. Yeah, I think that's all that's in the actual audience polling tool here. If anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, please do. Happy to answer it.
Yeah, there's one here in the chat from Danielle Borden. Is ACC considering offering training about FME/GIS integration?
Yeah, so we currently teach that in the scripting class. So it's GISC 2250. Scripting for GIS. We teach different automation techniques. We use tasks, we use model builder, we use Python, and we use FME. So that is part of that class already. And then from time to time, we offer workshops. This last year, we hosted the Tenris GIS Forum workshops that happened before the forum on our Highland campus. And so you can look out for some of those workshops where we cover things like FME.
So we have a question from Parker, and they ask, do you have open office hours to help the needy?
To help what? Oh, the needed?
Those that might need
those that need
open
it.
office hours.
The needy, yes, please email me. Let me know what questions you have or what you want to chat about. Happy to meet up and answer your questions or share my experience to the best of my ability. And I see a question in there about polygon data. Yes, FME handles points, lines, polygons, point clouds, raster imagery, rasters and imagery, all kinds of stuff. I think it's over 450 formats now that they handle.
And we have a question from Boriana. Do you have a class for ArcGIS and R, the language?
You know, we don't have a class for R. We do have several classes So the scripting for GIS, we have programming for GIS, and we have a web serve GIS where you learn a lot of different things, but I'm not aware that we have R integrated just yet.
And we have another question from Amy. Do you document your FME workbenches? Do you have standard operating procedures for them?
Yeah, so for me, I did not learn FME until I was a professor at Austin Community College. That's why I had Mike here as our guest speaker, our subject matter expert, because he uses it daily at work. So I think that would be a good question for him. I'm pretty sure they do, but he could answer that for you.
And we have a question from Kevin. Are any of your classes available online for overseas students?
Yes, absolutely. I've had students overseas in classes for sure. We have two main modalities that we teach. So one modality is called high flex. It's hybrid flexible. And this is where the student has the choice to attend class in person on campus or online through a web meeting. It's happening at the same time. So you have students in the classroom and students online. The professors in the classroom for every class meeting, but the students get to choose, do I want to go to campus today or do I want to join virtually? And so that high flex format is something we use in almost every single one of our face-to-face classes. And then we also offer online asynchronous, where you're provided with the course website, you're provided with the support and tutoring and help of your professor, but you conduct the work on your own schedule. So if you wake up at 1 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep, you can log in, you can watch the lecture video, you can step through the lab exercise, you can work on your project on your own time. And we do have a website. It's austincc.edu/GIS. And in there you can learn all about the courses we offer. We offer a level 1 certificate, a level 2 certificate, and an associate's degree in GIS. And you can see also some examples of student work. So projects that students have completed are shown there on that website as well, if you're interested in seeing some of the different projects and things that we work on in our program.
Oh, great. I was gonna do this whole speech of like, hey, has anyone got a buzzer beater question? But looks like we got a buzzer beater question. If anyone else has questions, for sure, feel free to continue asking. Moriana asked, can we attend only one class and not the whole certificate?
Yes, absolutely. You are welcome to pop in and take whatever class you want. Some classes do have what's called a prerequisite, where you have to have taken a class beforehand. Sometimes you can test out of that prerequisite. It's called credit for prior learning. But yes, you can hop in and just take one class if you want to.
And so once again, I just want to thank Mike and Stephanie for agreeing to spend some time with us and teach everyone about FME. I think this is great. I like lots of geospatial people. I've heard lots about FME. I've not seen lots about FME. So I really appreciate when someone is able to come up here and be like, here's the stuff, you know? I think that's great. So if we don't have any more questions, I guess I'm going to say, Stephanie, do you have any hot takes or words of wisdom or anything that you would like to end us with?
Sure. I mean, y'all are here because you're lifelong learners. You don't get into the GIS industry if you don't want to learn something new on a regular basis. So if you're considering dipping your toes into FME, please reach out. Let me know how I can help. That website is meant to be a resource for you to get started. Like I said, it has all the data and everything that you need to get started. But again, Safe Software and Esri have their own great trainings. But yeah, just keep up that lifelong learner mentality. And I hope to see you all soon, whether virtually or in person.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming.